Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to go ahead and get started. And as folks roll in, they can join. So my name's Erica. I'm on the communities team. Welcome to a VMUG webinar. We're excited to have the Broadcom team here today. We're an independent global customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge sharing, training, collaboration, and events. And then we encourage everyone to get connected to a local VMUG community near them at my.vmug.com. Please use the Q&A function for all questions throughout the webcast today, and our panelists will also be answering live if we have time at the end. And then the session is being recorded, and the recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email following the webcast. You can find all future VMUG webcasts here at this QR code. You can also go to my.vmug.com and look at all future events. And then we will be at Explore next week. So we hope to see many of you there. And if you won't be able to join us, I really encourage you to find the town hall on that previous QR code. We'll be discussing all the things that were announced at Explore, to show photos, and make sure we talk through all the things that you missed. And then we'll also be at Explore on tour throughout the fall, and then some VMUG user cons in our next global virtual event will be November 6th. So I'll kick it over to you, Michael, and he's a project manager here at Broadcom. Thanks.
Thank you, Erica.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen.
Okay. Yep, I think you should be able to now. Is it letting you?
No, I still see your screen.
Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. Let me figure out how to stop. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
We put in slideshow. Okay. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Michael Gandy. I'm a product manager for Data Services Manager, and I'm here today with Eric Gray, who is a technical marketing manager for Data Services Manager, called DSM. So if I say DSM, this is what it means. So I've got a couple of slides to set the context, and Eric will do like a live demo after that. So this first slide is to connect, right? You heard a lot in the past weeks about, a couple of weeks about VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF9, right? So you trust VCF to run all your workloads, right? You deploy them, you run them, you monitor them, you protect them. And there's a special category of workloads around what we call data services. Most of the data services today are databases, right? And most of them are like on the left side, the typical Oracle, SAP, IBM, and SQL Server. And what we know from talking to you, looking at our telemetry, at least 25% of the workload running on VCF are data services. A lot of them on the right side, right? Postgres, objects, Redis, called more modern or open source data services are growing very quickly as well in your environment. Overall, we've got 15 years plus, right, of experience to manage all these data services at large, these databases running on our infrastructure. Actually, we are partnering with a key vendor to make sure that they are working great on VCF. When I say working great, they're efficient, we've got a level of performance, security, and so on. So why we are here today? We see and we hear from you, there's a bit of a divide. And this is why it was organized the way it was in the previous slide. From the traditional database, think Oracle. Right? Everything is great. It's working good. It's working good on VCF. The vendor, traditional vendor database, are giving you the tools that you need to run them on-prem. From the open source data services, the story is very different. It's very difficult to find people with the skills to run those on-prem. You don't really hear about SQL Server, you don't hear so much about Postgres DBAs or Mongo DBAs or Redis DBAs, right? Usually you've got someone or a team kind of managing all of them. If you've got one or two to manage, might be okay. But if you start to have a lot of them, it starts to be very difficult. And the last thing, you're like, oh, wait, you forgot something on traditional database. If you think of Microsoft SQL Server, we hear something a bit in the between. You've got everything you need from the vendor from Microsoft to run SQL Server. However, it's usually easier to run now this in the cloud, right, in Azure SQL. But it's a bit harder to run this on-prem. And you ask, hey, VMware, can you do something to help us as well with SQL Server? Okay. So this is why we introduced some time ago DSM, right, Data Services Manager. And what it does, and I've got a double click to go a bit more in detail, but at a very high level, we give the infra admin or the IT admin the tool to be in control of managing, of delivering those free databases today as a service to their line of business, right? The application developer. What does it mean to control? It means that you as IT or infra admin, you can deliver these free databases, you can automate them, and you can give the multi-tenancy and the governance that is aligned to the other component of the stack. Okay, I will go in more details the next slide what it means. But at the end of the day, what is your end customer, right? This line of business, the app developer living in the line of business, what do they want? They just want self-service consumption. They just want to say, get database, ideally from an API, and get the database. And they want to ensure, and they want to make sure that the database they get is aligned with whatever are the guardrails set by the company policy. And they want this to be consistent. You heard a lot about the VM service, Kubernetes service, VKS, right, with VCF. This is just another service on the top of it. All the API are consistent, so they don't have to learn yet something new. And the last thing I want to mention on this slide is why we started with this free. So I say a lot of data services, but the reality is this free relational database are 80% of the data service category running on VCF today, right? Postgres and MySQL is by far the top two open source database that you are using, as we're hearing. And SQL Server is still the number one database running on VCF. Right, so this is why we want to help you to automate this. Okay, so I said I will double click, not too much, and you will see the product in action after. But there's two big components for you to think about. Let's go at the bottom. You heard again a lot about all the components of VCF. What we did with DSM, with Data Services Manager, is we integrated seamlessly with all those components. What does it mean? It means that when you go to your vCenter, you've got a plugin with DSM that you can do the resource allocation that you need, storage, compute, network, right? Like you will do with other things. If you are using VCF automation for self-service and multi-tenancy, it's integrated out of the box. What does it mean again? It's like all the concepts that are bought in VCF automation are aligned, and we are using them with DSM. So you don't have like different multi-tenant fashion to do things. By the way, I've been at VMware for 12 years. Sometimes we had so. Here, everything is aligned. And the same thing with VCF operation. If you are using it, you will see your database metrics and infrastructure metrics in one place, which when we talk to customers, a lot of value because it's much easier to see where the problem is. Is it an application issue? Is it an infrastructure issue? And you can resolve and troubleshoot much faster. I use 2 times in my sentence, if you've got. It is not a requirement. You don't need those VCF components to be deployed to run Data Services Manager. It's a better together story. Okay, so this is the bottom line, right? We are delivering a DBaaS solution for VCF. right? So we integrate seamlessly with those other components. The third part, and this usually I need to do a demo to customer really to believe me, is like we take care of all the lifecycle management of this free data engine. So you might say, hey, you only have three. Yes, it is true. And we did that on purpose because we are on the hook to automate those data services, this data engine for you, right? And we want to make sure that they work perfectly on VCF. So when you do like a single server, you do like a multi-cluster, we are taking care of all this plumbing to deploy and to manage the data engine on the underlying infrastructure. So we started with Postgres and MySQL, if you remember my first slide, because we've got 15 years of experience to run these databases internally. Actually, I've got another slide to tell you our story. So we wanted to make sure that we nailed it with these two. Right? This is why we call it this VMware Data Service Engine. When we were sure we nailed this down, which was in 2.2, DSM 2.2, we started adding partner, and we chose to add SQL Server because this was by far the #1 ask from all customers. If you asked me this question 2 years ago, I might have said, maybe it's not SQL Server we put, but overwhelmingly, all customers we talk to say, help us with SQL Server. And you know what? We put SQL Server as a tech preview in DSM 9, right? So you can use it today in the product as a tech preview. And the goal is to have a consistent experience. Whatever we are doing with Postgres, MySQL, we want to do it with SQL Server to give you, like, again, a database as a service experience. And this is what it means if you look on the left side, but this is what it means to bring database as a service. It means it's not only just about provisioning, even though it's important, but usually most customers I'm talking to, you already have some type of script or ways to do provisioning. What is really difficult is what is after. It's the security, ensuring the security of the database, is ensuring, the lifecycle management of the database, all the patching at scale. I talked to a customer with like thousands of Postgres instances for their developers. They had no idea like what is running where. This is a governance, right? And so they were very excited when they heard about DSM because we give this at scale. You can do that at your fleet level, right? The same thing with upgrade of version and so on. Basically, what you would expect from a typical Cloud DBaaS experience. And then, HA and data protection. As our customers are moving in production, these are more important, HA, DR, and all these things. And we are delivering this out of the box. Yeah, so a couple of slides. This is my last slide before Eric does a demo. But I wanted to quickly tell you the story of VMware and Broadcom. Broadcom acquired VMware, this company called VMware now, 2 years ago. VMware engineers, all R&Ds are using Postgres. Broadcom IT came and said, okay, it's great, we're acquiring this new company. We need to deliver now Postgres as a service and a few MySQL as a service as well. They didn't have any DBAs. They just wanted a modern private cloud. This is what, actually they call it enterprise private cloud, EPC, right? And the requirements were like, we don't want to have specialized people. We want database to be self-served by this new company called VMware and their division, right? They've got Broadcom has 26 divisions. So VM in minutes, database in minutes, container in minutes, right? The same thing, the same operating model. They didn't want custom codes. At VMware, we're very good to have custom codes internally, multiple iteration, very smart engineers, a lot of teams doing like this database as a service for each business unit. Broadcom said, no, we want to simplify out of the box software for all our division. So last year, they implemented their modern private cloud on VCF, right? And they are using Data Services Manager to deliver all the Postgres database for all VMware R&D. Right, so when I say we've got experience, it's not only on the data engines, but it's as well on delivering this at a really large scale. right? And you see the savings. So on this, I will stop sharing and I will give the ball to Eric.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm Eric Gray from Tech Marketing, and I'm going to be giving you a live demo of Data Services Manager today, DSM. We have a lot to cover, so let me just walk you through what we're going to be looking at before I get too far into it. In this demo, I'm going to show you two different personas. The one you see on the screen right now is the one we call Scott. He's a developer, end user, not an infrastructure administrator. He just needs self-service access to provision things like databases, Kubernetes clusters, etc. The other persona is Anita. She's the infrastructure administrator. And so we're going to start out. I'm going to show you what the end user sees. Then we're going to jump over. I'm going to show you a tour of what's going on with the vSphere environment behind the scenes there. We'll take a look at the DSM user interface. Then I'll bring it back to VCF automation to look at the provider side to see how you set up the things that the end users and the consumers have access to. And then we will hopefully wrap it up and end where we started with Scott and his shiny new database that is deployed. So let's get right to it. This is VCF 9, VCF automation 9. And if I log in as a regular end user, this is my view. I don't see a ton of things about administering the infrastructure. It's more about the business of consuming resources. So if you may be familiar with this, you can provision a new virtual machine. You can provision a database. Here, if you have DSM integrated with VCF automation, this is the experience that you would see. As an end user, you can do some self-service manual provisioning of the database. And it's pretty easy. A few steps in the wizard, click it, go. You have your database ready a few minutes later. But there's also an even easier way for end users, and that is the administrator can create blueprints, which are presented in a catalog view. So now your end users can go in here. They don't even need to mess around with all of those steps in the wizard. They can just choose one of these catalog items that has been curated and prepared especially for their use cases and their workflows. So in this example environment, you can see I've set up a few different blueprints. One is just to provision a Postgres database. And I have another one that is a blueprint with multiple components in it. So you have a Postgres database and also a virtual machine that runs a web interface called pgadmin, very popular tool for managing Postgres. And so I have this blueprint set up. We can go ahead and kick off a sample copy of that. Let's give it a name here. Let's give it a name. And we have, you can see the administrator who created this blueprint gave the end user a few options. You could decide if you want to have backups. You could decide if you want single virtual machine instance of Postgres, or if you want an HA cluster where you have a primary and a replica. We can just kick it off like this, and we're going to set up the pgadmin automatically. And this is the username. It's going to generate a password for us. Okay, so I'm going to submit that, and this job is going to be running while we're talking about some of the other infrastructure items. And this will take a few minutes, so we'll come back later and see how it did. So let me switch over to my other environment. So the dark mode is the end user, Scott, and everything else is going to be the regular light mode, and that is going to be our cloud and infrastructure administrator. So here you can see typical vSphere 9 environment as part of VCF 9. And if I look in here at my vSphere, I have a management cluster, a management domain, and a workload domain. So this is a very typical setup for VCF if you're not familiar with it. You might be familiar with this a little bit. In the management domain, this is where we have deployed things like our vCenter, our VCF automation, and also we've deployed the DSM appliance in here. We call this the provider or the DSM appliance. And so those are all deployed into the management domain where they can have ample resources. And then we have one or more workload domains, which can have clusters. And this is where your actual databases, virtual machines, et cetera, are deployed to. So here you can see some tasks going on in the background. That database job that we kicked off is provisioning. It's creating a new, you can see it's creating a new entity here underneath this namespace. So let's take a look at this namespace. DSM has two different options, which I'll show you in a minute, as for targets to where you'll provision your databases. So if you choose a namespace, you do a lot of the configuration in the namespace itself. So for example, this is where you would decide which VM classes you want to present to those end users. You know, what do you want to have best effort? Do you want to have guaranteed? What size should they be able to deploy? So you set those up, and then you can set up other things like storage policies. So maybe you want to limit the databases so they're only running on vSAN, and so you can designate that here. And then there's a few other things you can do when you're setting up a supervisor namespace. That's all done there. Now the other option, let me show you how you would actually configure DSM. It's a plugin in the vSphere client. So once you have it set up, you go to the vCenter node here, and then you have a new item down here for Data Services Manager. We go take a look at the infrastructure policies. And these are the targets where your databases will be provisioned to. All right, so we have the namespace. If you choose to create an infrastructure policy out of a namespace, it's pretty simple. You don't really have any settings there because they're all configured in the namespace itself. Or if you don't want to use supervisor and namespaces for your databases, that's fine too, because we have the ability to create a namespace right here. It's not namespace, excuse me. We can create an infrastructure policy directly using vSphere components. So in this case, you would create a new one of these, and you can see this is an existing one that I'm showing you. It has been created with access to this certain cluster. We can set up a storage policy. We can designate a network we want those databases to run on. We can set up some IP pools. So that's just a block of addresses that we want to use to allocate to those databases when they come online. And you can also, of course, create VM classes. So you have different sizes to offer to your end users. So either way you go, that's the target for your databases. And if you have any running, let's see if we have any here. I do have a SQL server running over here on this particular infrastructure policy. And then you can see the database that we fired up is in the process of coming online. So that's great. So let me switch over now to Data Services Manager interface. We got a convenient link right here. So I'll just click on it and pop it open. And so this is the interface. It is talking to that appliance that I mentioned earlier that's running on the management domain. If you're the administrator, you have some one-time setup things you'll do after you deploy this appliance, set up the host name, some certificate information. But one item I want to draw your attention to is the storage settings. DSM is built using modern cloud technologies like Kubernetes. And so one of the design decisions is to do backups to S3 compatible object storage. So one thing you do as an administrator is you need to designate some S3 buckets to be targets for your backups. Now, they don't have to be running on Amazon S3, of course. There are many other options. There are open source, many backup vendors provide an S3 target, so you can have an on-prem S3 target, and you can go in here. All you need is the address, the access key, secret key, and the bucket name to configure that. And then later on, when you're provisioning databases, you can see that these will be presented as options. And then you can do ongoing weekly backup, full backup. You can do incremental backups. We back up the transaction logs. Depending on how critical those workloads are, we can make sure we can restore them. Okay, a few other things I can show you inside of the DSM user interface. One is, as an administrator, you can control which versions of the databases your end users will be allowed to provision. Okay, let's say, you know what, Postgres version 14 is starting to get a little old. Let's let's disable that. We don't want anybody deploying any new versions of Postgres 14. Or, maybe 17 is too new, so we don't want, it's not, but, let's say we don't want people deploying that one yet. We're standardizing on 16 right now. You can do that with all three of the databases that we support, MySQL, Postgres, and also SQL Server. You can see in this environment, I've only enabled the latest version of MySQL, and then SQL Server is also available here. All right, now if you were to go in and provision a database directly inside the DSM user interface, you can do that. And here's how you would do that right here. Looks very similar to that interface we saw over there at the beginning of the demo. And here, you could choose your database name and everything, and that's very easy to use. You can see this is giving us a view into that database that we deployed through VCF automation. Notice that it says it was created in Kubernetes. That means it used the API instead of the DSM user interface to initiate that database provisioning operation. Still in progress, so we'll check on it again later. And then, the other thing is the archives. If we had any backups taken and then we deleted the database, you'd see archives in here. And that way you could still restore a database if you change your mind or you needed to fetch some information out of one that's been deleted. Okay, that's a Postgres. And I want to point out one more thing about SQL Server just briefly. You can see in Postgres, we have the instances, and you can create multiple databases, and those are called instances here. In SQL Server, we have a slightly different approach. All right, you as an administrator, you can create a SQL Server instance, and this is the underlying infrastructure. And then you may have one or more user databases running on top of that SQL Server instance. So this matches the model that many SQL Server users are familiar with. And so in that case, you might just have one big instance here, and then you can go in and create multiple user databases on top of that instance. They don't spin up new backend infrastructure for that. They're just very lightweight operation, just creates a database on top of that existing infrastructure. Now, if you want to see more about SQL Server, I'm not going to do any demos of that right now. We do have a video on the VCF YouTube channel where I walk through the whole thing. So you can check that out later. And so that's pretty much the highlights here. It's pretty straightforward, the user interface. And again, the end users can have a different view inside this user interface, or they can consume data services through VCF automation, which is what we're highlighting today more. So we're going to move on, and we're going to go to VCF automation. We're going to show you the provider side of things. So now I'm logged in as Anita. That's the infrastructure administrator. And there are a few things that you can do here as the administrator when it comes to setting up DSM. So one thing is you'll have to go to data services, and you will first, I've already done it, but you will configure VCF automation to point to your DSM instance. And so that's already done. And then the next thing you do is you create a data service policy. And again, I've already created one here, obviously, because it's working in the background as we're talking. But we can take a look at what this consists of. This is where the administrator sets up the guardrails to define what the end users, the tenants, will be able to do through VCF automation. And so you can see we have specified that they'll be able to deploy Postgres databases. We're going to allow all organizations in our environment to use it. We've specified 2 different versions, 15 and 16 in this case, but we could change that. And then we've also allowed 2 different infrastructure policies to be used by those end users, depending on maybe the different attributes of availability or performance that they need. And then we also have allowed the 2 backup locations, so the end users can choose the target for those database backups, so they can have cloning from a backup. They can have recovery if there's some kind of a failure or outage or corruption. And so that's the kind of thing you can control through the policy. It's the permissions. And once those things are set up, the administrator can go over to the organization portal. So in this environment, we just have one sample organization called Acme, good old Acme. And if I go to the Acme org portal, then I can take a look at what the administrator has going on as far as configuration here. This is a similar view that we saw when we were logged in as the end user, but obviously there's a lot more administrative type options in here. So one thing that we can do is take a look at the blueprints. And these blueprints match the ones that we saw earlier in the catalog. So the catalog that Scott used to deploy a Postgres database with pgadmin was created here in this environment. So like we can take a quick look at it. This is the YAML that defines this deployment. And you can see there's a couple secrets and the database itself, the virtual machine that's running pgadmin. Those are all defined here using Cloud init. We're installing the packages, and everything is created by the administrator. And then we present those into the catalog, and the catalog shows, as we saw, Scott deployed it. Okay, so now let us see. We do have another view back into here. Oh, and it looks like we have just finished. Okay, the new database that we fired off is ready. Okay, and we can jump back over and take a look at what's going on in vCenter again. So just so we can verify, we have the namespace, the database that's being deployed into that namespace. And then we had another namespace I didn't really talk about, but this is the one that the tenant has access to for deploying their regular workloads that are not data services. And so this is where that Ubuntu virtual machine is ending up. And you can see, it looks like it's coming online. Looks like the Cloud init has finished running. And so let us go back over and see if Scott has the results here. Okay, so we're back logged into the tenant portal as an end user. The instance that I kicked off earlier as Scott is done. So I'm going to click on it and see, and yep, sure enough. So everything's done. This is just the final results here. I deployed the database itself, okay, and typical Postgres database. If you know Postgres, that it usually listens on port 5432. It has the name I supplied earlier, has an administrator username, and then we've deployed that second VM running pgadmin just as a demonstration to show you can have multiple components in that environment. And so let's click on this and see if it's initialized yet. Of course, it's a live demo, so we didn't give it quite long enough. I think the Cloud init is still running in there behind the scenes. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So, but in the meantime, what we can do is I can show you not the graphical interface, but a more typical way that a developer may interact with a service like this, the database, is to get what's called the connection string. This is a specially formatted URL. It looks like a URL. It has the database username, password, port, etc. So this is the type of thing that an administrator really is looking for when they're going to use a data service. So what I can do is I can copy that connection string, okay? And then I can pull up a console and I can see if I can log in to that database using that connection string. And if I go there, oh, sure enough, it's showing I'm connected, okay? So we can even do a more daring live demo here. We can use PG restore, and we can use that connection string. And then we have a database dump, just a small little database full of city names. And we can load that into there. And it should work. This error message is because there's a mismatch in the client and the server version. I have a newer version of the restore going back to an older version of the database itself. It's just a warning. It doesn't affect anything. So it looks like that restored the database dump as far as I can tell. So then I will log in there again. And let me see if I have a handy query I can throw in there real quick. So here's just a simple select into that database and boom, what do you know? Pulled up all of the cities in the world with the top population. So that worked. And so that's what your end user developer would really care about. They're working on some kind of application. It needs the credentials to get into Postgres. That's it. They don't want to spend the day building virtual machines and setting up databases. And so let's take another second look back at our PG admin, see if it fired up. If it didn't, well, sorry, it's a live demo and that's what happens. I think that Cloud Init is still installing all of the components and bringing that web service online, but it would normally work there. So those are the highlights. We've covered the end user view, how an end user can consume a database from VCF automation. We took a look at what's going on in the vSphere side of things. We showed you the provider side of VCF automation, how the provider can create blueprints and catalog items for those end users. And then we wrapped it up by showing how the developer would connect to the database and do his day-to-day jobs in the private cloud, getting his database as a service. So I can pause there and we'll see, were there any questions that we want to take while we still have the environment open, or I can turn it back over to Michael to wrap things up.
I think we answered most of the question, James and I. I will answer Nikhil's question live as well, because
okay,
I think we're good.
I'm going to turn that off, turn it back
me,
over to you.
Yes, let me share my screen for just a couple of slides. Let me put back on slideshow. So Nikhil, you asked about the licensing. So if you remember my slide, I had the VMware services and the partner, right? So for Postgres and MySQL, this is included in the offering, right? We are delivering the end-to-end from the management to the support of Postgres and MySQL. For SQL Server, right, you bring your own license from Microsoft. So whatever, license, if you're using standard, we've got customer using a mix, whatever, contract you've got with Microsoft for this license, you just bring the license, right? So we are using that to automate the lifecycle management of SQL Server on VCF. And what we see as well is customer wanted to use developer or Express license for some of the environment. So now what we want to give them is like a unified view of all of that running in their VCF environment. So hopefully I answer the question. Wait, someone is putting, so I will not open this. So I've got a couple of slides. I don't know if you see when I put Q&A, I just like my laptop screen here. I wanted just to have a couple of slides to wrap up what you've seen. First of all, thank you, Eric, for making a live demo. So DSM 9. So first of all, DSM 9, the version aligned to VCF 9, but you can run DSM 9 on your VCF 5.2 today, right? So I wanted to precise this. But you see 4 bubbles. So let me go through them and what they need. The first one is really like the notion of a private cloud. So, you heard a lot about this private cloud, this notion of private cloud with VCF. And, if you look at public cloud, like take Amazon, for example, so what are the top services? I'm sure like if we had a survey in this, it will come like EC2, RDS, S3 will come across, a large sample across like the top 3 services from Amazon, right? It's the same thing when you build a private cloud. Like you need compute network storage and you need some type of database to build your application, right? So this is why we built data services managers to give you this capability to deliver private cloud. So it's a core component again and again, anytime we talk to customer. And this is why as well, we focus really on the top 3 data services that are today relational database, right? Because they are 80%, and we want to make sure that we give you those first. The cloud experience is what Eric showed you, right? It means 2 things for me. One, we give the IT admin, the infra admin, the cloud admin, whatever name we want to give, basically a new power is basically to deliver database as a service to your line of business. You don't need to be a database expert. You don't need to be a Kubernetes expert, right? We do that for you. So this is what is my first bullet, right? You don't need to be an expert. This is using the tools that you are familiar with. You are just expanding your capabilities, and you can deliver this on-prem, right? You don't need your application team to go around, above, under, and do that themselves or go to public cloud. You can really deliver an efficient service on-prem, as I showed with the example from Broadcom IT. But at the same time, you give them what they're asking, which is self-service. They actually don't really care where anything is running, to Eric's point, right? They don't want to be in the business of like deploying stuff. What they want is just have what they need quickly, efficiently. Maybe they don't really care if it's like following the guardrail of like the IT organization, but if it done out of the box without having to do any ticket, perfect. You know, the application is more secure and goes faster. The unified platform, right? The third one, this is more for you. You know, all the concepts, and some of these concepts in the, like, 10 years ago, or even like 5 years ago, depending on the product from VMware, they would be slightly different. Now, the power of like VMware Cloud Foundation is really all these concepts are consistent across all services. This is the value that we are bringing. Everything is unified and consistent. And this enables us to deliver this private cloud experience. And the last one, we didn't really spend time, it had some question, right? Are we doing patch and upgrade? Yes, we do patch, we do upgrade, we do HA, we do multi-region DR, we do scaling up and down. We didn't really spend time there. We could do a deep dive on that. But the goal here, this last one, is like it's enterprise ready. It is enterprise ready for 1 year. It has been in production at Broadcom IT for the last year, serving all R&D. And we've got customers from the financial industry. Someone asked, hey, do you have best practice from Oracle to Postgres? We're not in this business. Customers are choosing what data service they want to use. If they think that going from Oracle to Postgres is a good business move, that it can be in some time, we give you the endpoint to run Postgres as a service, right? And the financial industry is very interested in DSM because it gives them like all the bullet point before, right? Like the compliance, the governance that enterprise IT needs, right? So we see a lot of like interest, and I mentioned a large bank in Germany is going in production with moving some of their workload, not all of them, but from Oracle to Postgres, right? And it brings some saving to them. So a lot of details here. I put in the link as well the video from Eric from SQL Server. I put Cormac Hogan's blog. Maybe some of you know from the vSAN team, but a lot of practitioner blog posts answering in everything we said or showed in detail with videos and like step by step. So I would say bookmark it. That's where I put it. We've got the hands-on lab as well if you want to, play a bit more with the product by yourself. Of course, the web. I put a QR code here because, if you want to talk to the product team, myself, Eric, and James, who is like answering all this Q&A. Thank you, James. Sign this QR code, put your name, and some of us will reach out so we can have like a bit of a deeper dive. And this is my last slide. As you know, I think every presentation is ending on this one, but we will be in person in VMware Explore next week. So Yeah, I believe it is next week. So if if you are there, come to say hi. On Monday, actually, I will be doing a tutorial to go in much more detail, a deep dive on how to use DSM and how actually to migrate from any source, public cloud, do it yourself, whatever you are doing with Postgres to DSM, and to show you, how it will make your life easier, hopefully. And I do as well a Meet the Expert roundtable in the afternoon, and we've got expert-led workshop with Kim Delgado. So again, you can have I think it's 1 hour and a half, going in the product, and of course there's a booth demo. And I think, yes, that's it. So I will stop sharing, give back to Erica, and maybe see if we've got any question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining for the webinar. I just have a few outgoing slides, but yes, please continue to use the chat and the Q&A. We still have our panelists for a few more minutes. This session was recorded and it will be distributed in a wrap-up email following the webcast. Please fill out the survey. It'll auto-populate once you close it out. This helps us provide fresh content for you in future webcasts. And then use the code community for 10% off of VMUG Advantage 1-year membership. And then we have a few slides just about VMUG Advantage and the role that it helps folks play in developing skills and making their professional development a little easier. So little things about VMUG Advantage. And then I think that's all we have. So I'll let a few more questions in chat roll in. But thank you all so much for your time, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I think we answered all the question. So maybe let's give it 1 minute, and if no one has a question, we give you back 13 minutes.
Erica, can I share one more time?
Absolutely, go for it.
Oh, you need to stop sharing, Erica. So. Yeah.
All right. So now sufficient time has passed, and our VM and the cloud init as everything has come up. So I wanted to just pop that open one last time and show you that this Postgres database that we deployed is really a standard Postgres database that you can use this popular open source tool with. There's nothing proprietary about it. This is just what you might expect to see. Oops, let's go to one of those tables that we loaded in through the CLI, and it's all here. So there's just an example of what a end user administrator, or not administrator, but developer might see in their database day-to-day activities. That's it. Just wanted to end on that. Call the end credit scene for this episode.
I think we answered all the questions, Erica.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. I'll give you a couple minutes back. Bye.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.